Hello everyone, today I want to talk to you about the third angry statement from the National Security Office saying that anyone who sabotages the election will be severely punished. In addition, there are commentators in Japan saying that Japan is up against China with a ratio of 5-20 and that messing with China will not end well. Meanwhile, the yen has plummeted and Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi is facing economic shocks. Her anti-China stance has backfired and cracks are already appearing in the economy. Even the Japanese themselves are saying that Sanae Takaichi can't handle this game. On November 19th, Japanese news commentator Yoshikazu Tamagawa, on a program under a TV station, analyzed China's response to Sanae Takaichi's remarks on Taiwan. Looking at the trade dependency between China and Japan, he believes that Japan will face enormous difficulties in the future. On November 18th, Munetaka Ide, an economist at Nogawa Comprehensive Research Institute, said that since both the mainland Chinese and Hong Kong governments have called on their citizens to avoid traveling to Japan, and referencing the 2012 Diaoyu Island sovereignty dispute, if the number of tourists from China and Hong Kong to Japan drops by 25.1% over the next year, just like it did back then, this would result in a decrease of 1.79 trillion yen, about 90 billion Hong Kong dollars, in spending by mainland Chinese and Hong Kong tourists in Japan within a year, causing Japan's GDP to decline next year. Speaking about the 29%, he then discussed Sino-Japanese trade, comparing the trade dependency between the two sides. He said that, looking solely at Japan's trade with China, it already accounts for over 20% of Japan's total trade volume, while China's trade with Japan only makes up about 5-6% of its total trade volume. It's not hard to see which side would be more affected by a trade disruption. Tamura also mentioned that China might exert further pressure in the future, noting that China holds nearly 50% of the world's rare earth reserves. He said he does not rule out the possibility that China might stop supplying rare earths to Japan, and that if such a situation were to occur, Japan would find itself in a very difficult predicament. Tamura once said that Japan simply cannot go to war with China, and what's even more critical is the constitution in place. If the Chinese really decided to fight, what good outcome could there possibly be for Japan as a country or for its people? Yokozuki's comments were like a bucket of cold water poured over Sanae Takaichi's momentum. However, he is facing an even more pressing issue, and it's happening in the economic sphere. Back in October, before Sanae Takaichi even took office, the market was betting on his fiscal expansion policies to boost Japan's economy. The Japanese stock market hit a record high in October, but now, less than a month after Sanae Takaichi became prime minister, this so-called Sanae Takaichi boom is already being questioned. It's like a rebound that has now turned into a sell-off of Japanese assets, and for the stock market, it's even more like the last straw for Abenomics, causing both the yen and Japanese stocks to fall further. The Nikkei index has already given up all the gains it made since October 21st, when Sanae Takaichi was elected. The Japanese government is expected to announce the long-awaited economic stimulus package on November 21st, but now the market is starting to worry that Sanae Takaichi's upcoming plans to increase spending will worsen Japan's fiscal predicament. And the sell-off of Japanese assets may have only just begun. On November 18th, the yen's exchange rate dropped by 1%, with the yen falling to 155.38 against the US dollar at one point, marking its lowest level since January this year. Not only did the dollar-yen exchange rate fall to a historic low in the 150s, but the bond market was also turbulent, with Japanese bond prices plunging. The yield on Japan's 10-year government bonds surged to its highest level in 17 years, which is putting increasing pressure on Sanae Takaichi, leading to a new dilemma. Japan's economy remains sluggish, with an annualized growth rate of minus 1.8% in the third quarter. If it contracts for 2 consecutive quarters, the economy will fall into recession. Normally, interest rates should be cut to stimulate the economy, but the yen is in crisis, having fallen below the 155 mark against the US dollar. To support the yen's exchange rate, raising interest rates is now a one-way street. However, raising rates will further drag down Japan's already struggling economy. With such a weak economy, at this moment the governor of the Bank of Japan held a crucial meeting with Sanae Takaichi. This meeting is now seen as a showdown. After the meeting, the governor of the Bank of Japan came out of the conference room and told reporters that he had clearly conveyed the relevant message to the Prime Minister. The Bank of Japan is gradually scaling back its loose monetary policy that has been supporting the economy. The governor of the Bank of Japan's determination to raise interest rates appears unwavering despite the complex economic situation and political pressure. Sanae Takaichi has a history of opposing rate hikes, which has made the market worry that there might be disagreements between the Japanese government and the central bank. This concern has directly led to a rapid depreciation of the yen. According to a survey conducted last month covering 50 economists, half of the respondents predicted that the Bank of Japan would raise interest rates by 0.5% on December 19th, and almost all economists expect this to happen. The rate hike will be implemented by January next year at the latest, but some traders now speculate that the Bank of Japan might delay the rate hike in order to protect the economy. However, this kind of speculation has further intensified the selling pressure on the yen, creating a self-reinforcing cycle of depreciation. From a political perspective, Sanae Takaichi may not directly oppose a rate hike, because if the yen continues to weaken, it will push up the prices of imported goods, increasing the inflationary pressure faced by households during the holidays. Japan's key inflation indicators have reached or exceeded the central bank's target for 3.5 consecutive years. The ongoing rise in prices is changing Japan's long-standing deflationary economic norm. Under the leadership of Sanae Takaichi, the ruling Liberal Democratic Party has suffered two major defeats in national elections over the past 13 months. Voter dissatisfaction with soaring living costs is considered the main reason for the LDP's losses. In response, the government has rolled out a series of measures to ease household pressures. These measures include subsidies for utilities and reductions in gasoline taxes. The focus of these policies is clearly on using fiscal support to help Japanese citizens. However, increasing subsidies will also widen the fiscal deficit and exacerbate inflation. According to data estimated by the International Monetary Fund, Japan's fiscal challenges are evident. The country's total public debt is expected to reach 229% of its economic output this year. This ratio is the highest among developed economies, and Japan's fiscal risks have already become a concern for global investors. This has become a focal point for concern. Just last week, turmoil in the UK market was also triggered by the country's high fiscal deficit, highlighting the fragile balance between fiscal discipline and market confidence. Japan is now treading a similar path, but on a much larger scale than the UK. The Japanese economy is facing a real dilemma. To sum it up, first, Sanae Takaichi tried to boost his approval ratings by taking an anti-China stance, but this provoked a strong reaction from China. The sharp drop in Chinese tourists is already expected to cause Japan's GDP to fall by 0 point next year. 9%. Last quarter, Japan's GDP was already at minus 1.8%, and it's certain to decline further in the future. And that's not even accounting for the impact of any further countermeasures from China. China's economic retaliation is hitting Japan where it hurts. Second, as Japanese commentators have pointed out, Japan's trade with China accounts for 20% of its total trade, while China's trade with Japan only makes up 5% of its total. This shows that the impact of this standoff is completely disproportionate. If Japan tries to go head-to-head with China, what good outcome can the Japanese people expect? Third, further deterioration in China-Japan relations will put additional downward pressure on the Japanese yen. A sharp drop in the yen would force an interest rate hike, but raising rates would further drag down the economy. It looks like Sanae Takaichi will soon be caught in a wave of trades betting against Japan, and the Japanese people will soon feel the pain. As for Takaichi's rise to power, it might not be a comfortable seat after all. Now, you wanted to talk about recent rumors aimed at undermining Hong Kong's elections. Their actions are quite unusual. For example, one piece of news claims that a company is recruiting voters for a reward of $150 per person to respond to the election on December 7th, asking them to take photos as proof, and so on. This has sparked much criticism of the government online. The Office of the Commissioner of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has issued a third statement saying some people inside and outside Hong Kong keep changing tactics, and the Legislative Council election is being targeted. A spokesperson for the Hong Kong office said certain anti-China, anti-Hong Kong elements and internal forces, though their influence is waning, remain malicious. They seek fame and profit, secretly incite people to boycott the election, and stir up trouble as activists. The Office of the Commissioner in Hong Kong will defend national security with zero tolerance and will strictly punish, according to law, any acts or activities that interfere with or undermine the election and endanger national security. By observing those online comments, it's clear that the National Security Office is acting with a clear strategy. For example, there have been online posts offering $150 per person to get people to vote and then take a photo as so-called paid voting. However, these paid voting posts are already of dubious origin. When some sensationalist media interviewed a spokesperson from the ICAC about this, the ICAC stated that if the activity is purely to promote the election and does not involve voters voting or not voting for certain candidates in the election, then the Elections, Corrupt and Illegal Conduct Ordinance does not specifically restrict such actions. Meanwhile, the Office of the Privacy Commissioner reminded the public to understand the purpose of collecting income information and to pay attention to the authenticity of the related information. However, on forums where such news is discussed, some comments exaggerate and distort the facts, attacking the government, and some even go as far as to directly spread rumors and stir up trouble. For example, there are comments claiming that the election cannot be regulated under Section 11 of the Elections, Corrupt and Illegal Conduct Ordinance, which states that anyone who, without lawful excuse, offers or provides any advantage or reward to another person or a third party to vote or not vote in an election is committing an offense. However, if you actually look up the relevant information, If you actually check Section 11 of the ordinance, you'll find that it is completely different from what the commenter claimed. Section 11 addresses corrupt conduct in elections, specifically bribery of voters or others. It states that anyone, without reasonable excuse, who offers an incentive to another person to vote for a particular candidate in an election is committing an offense. The actual law is about offering benefits to someone to vote for a specific candidate, not simply offering benefits to get someone to vote. This commenter has twisted the law, changing the original prohibition against offering benefits to vote for a particular candidate into just offering benefits to vote. Offering benefits to get people to vote is clearly spreading rumors. The related comments have led many people to want to report to the ICAC. In fact, intentionally misrepresenting the content of the law like this already violates Article 24 of the Safeguarding National Security Ordinance, which concerns incitement. Article 24 defines incitement as the intent to arouse hatred or contempt among people in the SAR towards the administrative, legislative, or judicial organs of the SAR, and this is illegal. And as for those leaving these comments, they fabricate the content of the ordinance, then claim that the ICAC is not enforcing the law, which could make people hate the ICAC. This already borders on violating the offense of incitement. So, when these seemingly plausible pieces of information appear online, distorting the content of the law and stirring up public resentment against the government, and when some people are even telling others not to vote on December 7th, are these just random comments? Or are they intentional acts of incitement? These people are deliberately spreading false information targeting the election. The people posting or commenting might not even be in Hong Kong at all. They maliciously attack our local system with confidence, knowing that the government will have a hard time holding them accountable. The problem is, if others foolishly share or forward this kind of content online, calling on people to attack the government or even boycott the election, they could easily end up breaking the law. In any case, on December 7th, we encourage everyone to come out and vote together.